The bubbles clung to my hands longer than usual that evening. I kept rinsing the same plate over and over, even though the water had turned lukewarm and the sponge was starting to fall apart. It was Margaret's favorite floral pattern, chipped at the edges, a gift from her mother back in '74. I never got around to buying a new set. Felt wrong somehow, like replacing a part of her. Before I tell you what happened next, before we get into the dinner, the text, the police, I'll ask one thing. Hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Let me know where you're listening from, especially if you've ever had to choose between family and the truth. Trust me, it matters. There were other things I didn't replace either. The recliner she died in, still draped in that old cream blanket. Her slippers beside the bed, dusty but untouched. The photo albums neatly stacked in the same drawer she kept them. My life had calcified around the shape of her absence. And then Rick called. A full year of silence, not even a birthday text. I didn't expect to hear from him again. Last I knew, he'd left angry after I refused to bankroll his latest opportunity. Something about a high-yield investment group that smelled more like a fancy pyramid scheme. I remember telling him, "Son, if it sounds like magic, it probably turns into smoke." He called me bitter. I called him naive. We both slammed down our phones that day, so when I saw his number blinking on the old caller ID box above my kitchen phone, I froze. Just stared at it like it was an apparition. My heart beat hard in my ears. I picked up. "Dad," he said, and I knew something had changed. His voice sounded smaller. "It's me." We didn't speak for long. He invited me to dinner, him and Emma, said they wanted to reconnect. Emma was making pot roast, he mentioned, like it was some kind of peace offering. Margaret's recipe, apparently. I didn't know what to make of it. I sat there after the call, staring at our wedding photo. Margaret looked like she always did. Confident, knowing, full of that quiet strength I never quite managed to find without her. It took me an hour to decide. I pulled the good suit from the back of the closet, brushed the shoulders, spritzed a bit of her perfume in the air, let it settle over the room. The drive to Montclair was long and the neighborhood unfamiliar. Rows of polished stone and curved driveways. Rick met me at the door, arms wide, smile wide, everything wide and too bright. Emma was immaculate as a wooer. Candlelight flickered on their china, music low, wine decanted, soft linens folded like origami birds. It all felt a little staged. Still, I played along. We toasted, we ate, we talked. Emma asked about the restaurants. Rick complimented my aftershave. They laughed a little too hard at things I said. I told myself they were just nervous. I wanted to believe it was genuine. And then, right as dessert was about to be served, I felt my phone buzz. A number I didn't recognize. The text said, "Get up and go now. Don't say anything to your son." I looked up. Rick was pouring me another glass. Emma was smiling sweetly. The chandelier shimmered. I stood up. "Bathroom," I muttered, even though my voice barely came out, and I left. I walked straight past their kitchen, past a woman I didn't recognize. She barely looked at me, and out through a side door that led to a lawn so pristine it made my own backyard feel like a junkyard. I kept walking, and 30 minutes later the police were knocking on their front door. You won't believe what happened next. I didn't stop walking until I hit the corner of Elmwood and Briar. The air felt colder than it had minutes earlier, though I couldn't tell if it was the wind or what I'd just left behind. I ducked behind a row of boxwoods near the sidewalk and checked my phone again. Same message. No follow-up. No number I recognized. Just those 8 words carved into my memory now. Get up and go now. Don't say anything. The street was too quiet, the kind of quiet that settles over expensive neighborhoods right after dinner. I spotted a small park across the road and made for the bench near the lamppost. I needed to think, and fast. I pulled out the rideshare app and requested a car back to Brooklyn, but it said 14 minutes. Too long. so I canceled and hit the Yellow Pages app instead. Called a car service I used to use for Margaret's appointments. The dispatcher still remembered me. Jonathan? Haven't heard from you in a while. Everything okay? I need a car. Fast. Montclair, 247 Elmwood. That's your son's place, right? I didn't answer that. She gave me a time, 7 minutes. While I waited, I scanned the messages on my phone again. Nothing. But my gut wouldn't let it go. That dinner had been off from the start. The fake laughter, the overdone praise, the weird way Rick watched my whiskey glass like a hawk. And Emma, with her perfect timing and perfect smile, it had all felt choreographed. I rubbed my temples and tried to pull the memory into focus. How many drinks had I had? 2? Maybe 3. But I'd felt lightheaded way more than I should have. The room had started tilting. I chalked it up to nerves, rich food, maybe the wine. But now I wasn't so sure. The town car arrived. Black Lincoln, clean, warm. The driver was quiet. Thank God for that. I gave him my home address and said nothing else. As we pulled away from the curb, I twisted in my seat for one last look at Rick's mansion. The lights were still on. No movement in the windows. But something in me said they'd noticed I was gone by now. Back in Brooklyn, the streets felt narrower, familiar. The air smelled of old brick, subway steam, and Chinese takeout. Home. Inside, I kicked off my shoes and sank into the armchair Margaret made me buy after my back surgery. I sat in the dark, no TV, no music, just the hum of the fridge and the weight of what I'd nearly walked into. At exactly 10:12 p.m., my phone rang. Blocked number, I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again. Same number. This time, I answered. Jonathan Miller? The voice was low, calm, female, measured. Yes. You did the right thing tonight. Don't go back. Who is this? I can't say. Is this about Rick? About Emma? A pause. They weren't planning a reunion. They were planning a signature. What? Power of attorney. Asset transfer. They were going to get you to sign everything over. The whiskey? The voice hesitated. It was laced with something. A drug that makes you compliant. Cooperative. You were hours away from losing everything. I felt the floor drop out from under me. You need to call a lawyer, the voice added. Immediately. Then, click. The line went dead. I sat frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. The room had gone impossibly quiet. Not even the radiator dared make a sound. I reached for the cabinet where I kept my whiskey. Pulled the bottle I'd brought to dinner out of the bag. Same label, same seal. But the stopper had been twisted just slightly. Off center. I hadn't noticed before. My hands shook as I set it down. They'd tried to drug me, my own son, and they'd almost succeeded. I didn't sleep that night, not really. I dozed off around 4 a.m. and woke again before the sun. My throat felt raw. My thoughts kept looping back to that voice on the phone. Calm, anonymous, precise. The kind of voice that knew too much, and the words she'd used, compliant, cooperative, power of attorney. I'd spent 40 years building that business with Margaret. We opened our first restaurant in a leased storefront next to a laundromat and a pet supply store. The roof leaked, the kitchen stove barely lit, and we couldn't afford proper signage the first year, but we made it work. We always made it work. Now my son was trying to steal it all with poisoned whiskey and forged documents. By 7 a.m., I was already on the phone with my lawyer, Evelyn Chen. She'd handled our estate plans for years. Sharp as glass, polite as a hammer. She answered on the second ring. Mr. Miller, this early? I need a meeting. Today. Everything all right? No, but I'm fixing it. She got quiet, like good lawyers do when they know they're about to hear something that matters. Come in at 9. Bring any documents you can. Click. That was Evelyn. No fluff, no delay. I grabbed the whiskey bottle and packed it in a brown paper bag, tossed in my financial binder and the printed portfolio Margaret kept of all our business records, just in case. On my way out, I hesitated by the front door, then circled back and grabbed our will. We'd last updated it 7 years ago, back when Rick still called me Pops. The office was in a mid-rise downtown, above a dentist and below a dance studio. Evelyn met me at the elevator. She took one look at my face and said, "Conference room, now." I laid it all out. The dinner, the weird atmosphere, the drugged whiskey, the anonymous warning. She didn't interrupt, just took notes with a pen that clicked every few seconds, sharp and steady. When I finished, she opened her laptop. "First things first," she said. "We're securing your business accounts. I'm changing the passwords right now, updating your banking authorizations, and flagging all access from new devices." I nodded. "Second," she continued, "we're filing a formal notice with the state, revoking any power of attorney filings that may have been made under duress. We'll need to check the register. If they submitted anything, we'll contest it. Immediately." "And the drug?" I asked. "How do I prove it?" "You still have the bottle?" I handed her the paper bag. She slid it toward the far end of the table with 2 fingers. "I'll have it tested. Chain of custody will be airtight. But you're going to need to prepare yourself." "For what?" "For what happens when this goes public. Fraud, elder abuse, attempted poisoning." She looked at me hard. "These aren't just family matters, Jonathan. These are felonies." I felt the truth land heavy in my chest. "He's my son." "No," she said gently but firmly. "He was your son. The man who tried to drug you out of your life? He's something else." She gave me a list: bank contacts, credit freezes, document audits. Said she'd be in touch within 48 hours with a plan. I left her office feeling like I just walked out of a battlefield still breathing. When I got home, I sat in the kitchen staring at Margaret's old chair. I could almost hear her voice. "People show you who they are, John. Believe them the first time." I hadn't. I'd given Rick too many passes, too many second chances. And now? Now I'd nearly paid for it with everything we built. That afternoon, I got a new text. No name, just "they'll panic now. Watch what they do next." And sure enough, by dinner time, Rick was calling. Twice. Left a voicemail on the second try. "Hey, Dad, we're worried. You disappeared last night. Everything okay?" I didn't respond. An hour later, Emma texted, "We just want to make sure you're safe. Let us know you got home all right." The gall, the nerve to play concerned child and devoted daughter-in-law, after trying to dissolve my entire life over dinner and dessert. But I'd been warned. And now? Now I was ready. The next morning, I changed every password I had. Banking, business accounts, even the alarm system for the restaurants. I wrote everything down the old-fashioned way in a spiral-bound notebook that I hid in the boiler closet. Margaret would have called it paranoid. I called it surviving. Rick texted again around 10 a.m. "Can we talk today?" Just us. No drama. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't want to. Because I knew what would happen if I did. He'd rope me into coffee. Say all the right things. Look sorry. Act small. I'd seen that trick before. Long before the mansion and the marble floors. He used to do it after he'd wrecked something in the garage or lied about school. But this wasn't a broken bicycle or a C- on a quiz. This was premeditated betrayal. I stood at the kitchen window and watched Mrs. Chen across the street hang laundry on her tiny balcony. Her life was quiet, clean, honest. She waved when she noticed me watching, and I nodded back. It struck me just then I hadn't felt at peace in my own house in years. Not since the money started bleeding out every month, Not since Rick's needs became more urgent than my own breath. By noon, Evelyn had sent an update. Subject: urgent findings. She'd confirmed it. An electronic power of attorney document had been prepared but not filed. The system flagged it as incomplete. A draft, waiting for a signature. I stared at the screen. They were ready. That night hadn't been a trial balloon. It was execution night. The second half of her email gave me chills. A courier was scheduled to arrive at your son's home the next morning to collect signatures. Canceled at 10:42 p.m. after you left. They hadn't even planned to wait a day. They wanted my signature, my cooperation, my life that night. And if I hadn't walked out when I did, if I'd had one more sip of whiskey, they would have gotten it. I'd leaned back in my chair and looked around the kitchen. Same cracked tile, same busted light above the fridge. I'd put off repairs for years. Not because I couldn't fix them, but because I couldn't afford to. Every spare dime had gone toward helping Rick and Emma keep up the illusion that they were successful. That they'd built something from nothing, when in truth I had built it and they had taken it. My phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. This one from Emma. Jonathan, I don't know what's going on, but you're scaring Rick. We just want to talk. Let us explain. I deleted it. Let them sweat. That night, I pulled out Margaret's ledger. She used to track every dollar, every receipt, down to the dime. I flipped to the final page she ever wrote on, March 17th, 2016. The day before her surgery. She'd penciled in the words, "Teach Rick responsibility before it's too late." I never did, but maybe I could now. I didn't tell anyone about the ledger, not Evelyn, not the police. Not the voice on the phone. That one line from Margaret, tucked at the bottom of a yellowing page, hit harder than any of Rick's betrayals. Teach him responsibility before it's too late. She knew. Even back then, before the lies, before the manipulation, before the suits and silk napkins, she knew. I'd been a coward. I confused unconditional love with unlimited tolerance. I kept thinking he'd grow out of it, mature, find his footing. I figured the arrogance came from youth and the neediness from fear. But I never considered it could harden into something cruel. By Friday, I had a plan. Not revenge, not exactly, but the beginning of a slow unraveling. I started with the liquor store. I visited the boutique shop where I'd bought the whiskey, the one Rick insisted on opening that night. The clerk was a tall kid with glasses and a polite streak a mile long. When I showed him the bottle, he checked his records. "This one," he said, tapping the label on his screen. "Yeah, we keep it locked. No tampering. You bought this here?" "Yes." "And this?" He held up the photo of the one Rick had poured. "Has a slightly different cap. This is a refill." He didn't say it out loud, but I heard the subtext. Someone had emptied the original, replaced it with their own mix, and resealed it to look untouched. I asked for the footage. The clerk said he'd have to ask the manager. The next morning, the call came. They had video, security footage from 2 days before that dinner. Rick standing at the counter, chatting up the girl at Register 2, holding a bottle that matched the one in my kitchen. Except I'd never seen that girl. Never seen that register, because I didn't buy my bottle until the day after Rick had been there. He'd staged it, he'd bought the same brand, swapped the bottles, filled mine with whatever that drug was, Zetra, whatever, and planned the entire thing down to the label. I called Evelyn immediately. "We need a copy of that footage," she said, "and we need to talk to that clerk. This just turned from theory into hard evidence." The store emailed the file by noon. I watched it once, then again. Rick, in a navy jacket, laughing, paying in cash, leaving with a bottle tucked under his arm. I stared at the screen a long time. My son had planned to drug me with my own peace offering. By Saturday morning, Evelyn filed a preliminary report with the district attorney. Quietly. Just a flag for review, not an accusation. Yet. But we both knew what came next. The moment they realized I wasn't staying quiet, and I was done staying quiet. The call came Sunday morning, blocked number again. Same voice. "You did well," she said. They're rattled. Rick called 3 different attorneys yesterday. Emma tried to cash out a certificate of deposit, flagged immediately. "You're watching them?" "No," she said. "I just listen where I work." That confirmed it. She wasn't some outsider. She was inside their house, their orbit. "The night of the dinner," I asked. "Why warn me? Why risk it?" A long pause. "Because I watched them plan it for weeks, and I couldn't stomach it anymore." "Are you the housekeeper, Maria?" Another pause. Then softly, "Yes." Her voice changed when she said it. Less guarded, more tired. "They think I don't speak English," she said. "But I do. Fluently. I clean their home, I cook their food, I iron their lies, and I hear everything." "You knew about the documents?" "I saw them printed, twice. First draft had your signature forged. Emma didn't like the slant. Said it needed to match your handwriting. Rick practiced." My throat tightened. "They left nothing to chance," she continued. "Not even your pen. They tested a dozen at the office to match the ink you use at home." I closed my eyes. Margaret would have known the moment she saw Rick's face. She always had a way of looking through people. I inherited her spine, not her eyes. "Why now?" I asked. "Why not tell the police?" "Because I'm undocumented," she said. "And the moment I speak up, I become the problem, not them." She was right. One phone call and they'd paint her as the bitter maid, the angry immigrant, the disgruntled help. They'd bury her under lies and smile while doing it. "But you," she said quietly, "you have power. You're him. The man they need to look good in front of. And now I'm the man they fear." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. "Thank you," I said finally. "You saved me." I couldn't let them do that to someone who always said please and thank you. That hit harder than I expected. Before she hung up, she added one more thing. "They'll try again, just not with pens this time. Be careful who you open your door to." The line went dead. I sat in the quiet for a long time, and then I stood up, walked to the basement, and pulled the spare keys from their hook. I changed every lock in the house. The locks clicked shut with a finality I hadn't felt in years. Front door, side door, even the rusted latch on the garage that Margaret always insisted we didn't need to replace. I replaced it anyway. I wasn't just locking them out. I was sealing off the version of myself that kept giving the benefit of the doubt to people who didn't deserve it. By Monday, Evelyn had built a full portfolio. She called it Phase 1. The liquor store footage, copies of the unsigned legal documents, statements from 3 financial institutions confirming attempted account access, my notarized record of that dinner night, a lab analysis request for the whiskey sample. "The moment we go public," she warned, "you'll get sympathy and a storm. They'll deny everything. They'll smear you again. You ready for that?" "I'm ready." We decided to wait until the toxicology report came back. Once we had the proof of a sedative in that bottle, there'd be no more room for denial. In the meantime, Evelyn suggested a move I hadn't considered: freeze the business. "Temporarily," she said. "Just operations. No new hires, no property transfers. It sends a signal. You're locking things down." I signed the order. She filed it with the city. The next day, Rick called again. Left a message. Just one sentence. "Dad, please, this isn't what you think it is." Didn't even have the guts to say what this was. That night, I stopped by one of my oldest restaurants. Park Slope, the original. Miguel, my manager, looked up from the register like he'd seen a ghost. "Mr. Miller, everything okay?" "I just wanted to see it," I said. "Remind myself why I'm doing all this." He walked me through the kitchen, It smelled like pepper and garlic and heat. One of the new prep cooks was slicing onions, humming a pop song through his headphones. The tables were full. People were laughing. It felt real. It felt mine. On the wall, still framed after all these years, was a faded photo of Margaret and me in front of the grand opening banner. She had one hand on my chest and the other raised in a mock cheer, holding a wooden spoon like a torch. She believed in what we built. I couldn't let Rick erase that. As I left, Miguel walked me out. "You coming by more often?" he asked. "I think I will." He smiled. "It's better when you're here." I rode home in silence. No music, just the low hum of city traffic, and the weight of something settling in me that felt a lot like resolve. That night, I slept through till morning, first time in weeks. The toxicology report came in on a Thursday afternoon. Evelyn called me directly, no small talk. "It's confirmed," she said. "The whiskey sample you brought in? Laced with a compound called zetravalin. Street name's Zetril. It's untraceable in most casual blood panels, but in concentrated form, it's used in short-term compliance dosing. Makes people suggestible, docile. Like a truth serum?" "More like a willpower eraser," she replied. "You don't hallucinate. You don't black out. You just stop resisting." Which means if they'd gotten you to sign anything that night... I didn't need her to finish. "What now?" I asked. "I take it to the DA." Quietly. "This is no longer a civil matter, it's criminal. They won't move without full cause, but they'll open a case. You need to be ready for backlash." I've been ready. But I wasn't, really. Not for what happened next. 2 days later, I got a knock at the door. Rick. Standing there in a gray coat I'd bought him 6 Christmases ago. He looked thinner, paler, like the guilt was starting to rot him from the inside out. He didn't wait for an invitation, just spoke. "I know you know." I held the screen door between us. And I want to make it right." I said nothing. He looked past me into the hall, like he was trying to summon a memory that could save him. I panicked, Dad. I was in too deep. I owed people I shouldn't have borrowed from. I thought if I could just get through this month, restructure, maybe? You thought if you could drug me, manipulate me, steal everything I spent 40 years building, then maybe you'd land on your feet. I didn't mean for it to go that far. But it did. He looked down. Emma's gone. I blinked. What? She left, moved in with her sister in Connecticut. Blamed me for everything. Said I botched it. Said I should have made you trust us more. I nearly laughed. The gall of it. "So what now?" I asked. "You here for forgiveness?" He hesitated. "No," he said finally. "I'm here because I know the police will come knocking soon. I wanted to ask you, please don't press charges." There it was. The truth, plain and desperate. I stepped out onto the porch, pulled the door shut behind me. We stood under the gray October sky, 2 men carrying the wreckage of a family. "You know what Margaret would have said?" I asked. He didn't answer. She'd say, "Let him learn from this. Finally, let him face what he chose." "I'm your son," he whispered, "and I'm the man you tried to poison." He broke then. His shoulders crumpled. For a second, he looked 12 again. Lost. Small. But I didn't touch him, didn't hug him, didn't offer comfort. "Go home, Rick, while you still have one." He turned without a word. As he walked away, I watched the back of his coat flap in the wind, like something already unraveling. The midpoint had passed, the truth was out. Now came the fallout. I waited for the knock. Not Rick's this time, the other one. It came 5 days later, just after sunset. 2 officers in plain clothes. Badges out, voices calm. They didn't even ask if Rick was home. Just verified my identity, then asked to speak with me inside. Evelyn had warned me. "They may show up without fanfare," she'd said. No sirens, no drama, just paperwork and protocol. I led them to the kitchen where everything had begun. One of them, Officer Grant, had a notepad. The other, Patel, handled the recorder. They asked for a statement. I gave it. The dinner, the text, the whiskey, the anonymous call, the documents. Maria. They didn't flinch, just nodded, asked clarifying questions. The kind you don't ask unless you already know the answers. When I finished, Grant reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed evidence bag. My bottle. Confirmed trace amounts, he said. Zetravalin, illegally imported. High concentration, non-pharmaceutical grade. It's probably bought from offshore vendors. So it wasn't just some half-baked scam, I said. No, Patel replied. It was a full-baked felony. I signed the statement. They left. And suddenly the house felt quiet again, but not the kind of quiet that stings. It felt earned. The next morning, Evelyn called. They've opened a formal case, and she said, Rick's name is on it, so is Emma's. She left him. I heard, probably trying to save herself. Can she? Evelyn hesitated. If she flips first, maybe, but not entirely. Later that day, Maria called from a payphone. They searched the house, she whispered. Rick screamed at the officers, said it was a setup, that someone must have planted the drugs. Did they question you? I told them I didn't know anything. A pause. But if I'm called to testify, I will. Won't that put you at risk? It already has. Her voice cracked then, just slightly. I'm not brave like you, Mr. Miller. I just couldn't stand by. You're braver than you think, I said, and I want to help. How? Do you have another job lined up? No. Then you do now. She didn't answer. Starting wage, full benefits. Clean work, safe hours. You'd be managing our Crown Heights kitchen, if you want it. The silence on the line stretched until it trembled. I've never been offered anything that didn't come with conditions, she said. This one comes with respect. She exhaled. Then yes, thank you. Truly. That night, I reopened the Crown Heights location myself. Turned the key, walked through the kitchen, flipped the lights. The ovens roared to life. A week ago, I'd nearly lost everything. Now? Now I was building again. One honest brick at a time. 2 days after Maria accepted the job, I stood outside the Crown Heights restaurant at 6:58 a.m., just as the sun broke through the Brooklyn skyline. I hadn't opened a store myself in 15 years. Miguel had offered to help, but I said no. This one needed my hands on it. Maria arrived early, wore clean jeans and a navy cardigan buttoned to the throat. She carried nothing but a small notebook and a pen clipped to the collar. I offered her coffee. She refused politely, then asked where to begin. We started in the kitchen, walkthrough, inventory, scheduling. She took to it like she'd been doing it her whole life. By noon, she had already reorganized the prep station and corrected a supplier order I hadn't noticed was off by 20 pounds. You have a good eye, I told her. No, she said without smiling. I just pay attention. By closing time, the staff was calling her Boss Maria, with that easy respect workers give someone who earns it early. It reminded me of Margaret. That night I sat in the office at the back of the restaurant and opened the company books. I moved some funds, made the first transfer into a bonus pool I hadn't touched in years. Maria's name went at the top of the distribution list, and then I did something I hadn't done since Margaret passed. I wrote a letter, not an email, not a memo, a real handwritten letter to the board of my company, explaining what had happened, what I was doing about it, why the business was shifting, not just for protection, but for purpose. I told them the truth about my son's betrayal and how close we'd come to collapse. I told them about Maria, about integrity, about what mattered more than quarterly profit margins. I didn't ask for approval. I told them what was coming. Then I signed my name in full. Jonathan E. Miller. Not John, not Dad. Just the name that had built 7 restaurants from a $20,000 loan and a secondhand grill. I faxed it to Evelyn. She'd distribute it legally. By Friday, 2 board members had reached out. One called the letter the most honest thing I've read in this business in 20 years. The other said, "Whatever you're doing, Jonathan, don't stop." I didn't plan to. And then, late that evening, as I was finishing payroll, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring. It buzzed again. This time, a voicemail. I waited a minute before I pressed play. Emma's voice. Quiet, slurred. "You win. You happy? He's losing his mind. Selling furniture, that day begging people for cash. We could have had it all. You could have helped. But you had to be the hero." The message cut off. I deleted it. There was no satisfaction in her misery. Only confirmation that I'd done the right thing by walking away. By Saturday morning, my restaurant was full again. Maria was on the floor, clipboard in hand. My hands didn't shake when I poured my first cup of coffee. The fallout was still coming, but so was the rebuilding. I knew which one I cared about more. The official charges came down on a Tuesday. Evelyn called just after lunch. "They filed," she said. 3 counts against Rick: attempted fraud, criminal conspiracy, and elder abuse. Emma got 2. No bail granted for either, pending arraignment. I didn't say anything for a long time. I sat in my truck outside the restaurant with the engine off. The windows rolled halfway down. I could hear the faint clang of pots inside, Maria barking orders in Spanish, the scent of onions and warm bread rolling through the vents. Evelyn's voice softened. "You still okay with all this?" "Not okay," I said, "but clear." That night, I pulled out the old cedar box Margaret gave me the year we opened our 3rd location. It held only 3 things: our first business license, a black and white photo of us in front of the restaurant, and a folded letter in her handwriting. I hadn't opened that letter in 6 years. I did now. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. Or close. And you're probably working too hard, too angry, too afraid to stop. So stop. Just for a minute. Breathe. And remember, we built this for more than money. We built it so we wouldn't be afraid to age, to belong, to leave something clean behind. She had signed it simply. Love you. Always? I stared at the page until the words blurred. She never said anything about betrayal. She hadn't needed to. Wednesday morning, I walked into the downtown courthouse for the preliminary hearing, just to be present. I wore the same navy suit I'd worn to Margaret's funeral. The cuffs were loose now, but I didn't care. The courtroom was cold, clinical. A few reporters, no family. Rick sat at the defendant's table in a beige jumpsuit, eyes hollow, hair uncombed. He looked everywhere but at me. Emma sat behind him in the gallery. She wore a cheap gray blazer and smudged mascara. Her left hand trembled as she picked at her sleeve. She glanced up once and saw me. Her mouth tightened. Not in regret, not even in fear. In resentment. As if I'd taken something from her that she believed was hers. The judge called order. The arraignment began. The prosecutor read the charges. Mr. Richard Miller, you are hereby charged with criminal conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted elder abuse, and intent to defraud through use of a controlled substance. Rick didn't flinch, just stared at the table. Emma's charges followed. Her lawyer entered a plea deal request. The judge noted it for review. Rick's attorney stood to speak. My client would like to make a brief statement. The judge allowed it. Rick stood, cleared his throat. I made mistakes, he said. Big ones. But I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I was drowning. I thought my dad would understand, like he always did. Then he looked at me. But he changed. The courtroom went silent. I stood too. Quietly, without permission. The judge gave me a tired look but didn't stop me. I spoke plainly. No, I didn't change. I just stopped pretending it didn't hurt. Then I sat back down. Rick did too. That was all. The judge dismissed the session. Trial date set. Bail denied. Media embargo lifted. By evening, 3 local outlets ran the story. Brooklyn restaurateur targeted in elder fraud plot by own son. Margaret's letter stayed open on my desk that night, her words curling up at the edges from where my thumb had pressed them too long. We built this so we wouldn't be afraid. I wasn't anymore. 3 days after the story broke, I stopped by my original Park Slope location to check on inventory. When I walked in, 3 of my oldest employees stood by the front register. Nora, server since OI6, looked up first. Her eyes were wet. "We saw the article," she said. "Why didn't you tell us?" I shrugged. Didn't want pity. Just needed it fixed. Miguel came around the counter and hugged me, real tight. "We got you," he said. "This whole place does. You built this. We don't forget that." It hit me then. I hadn't just been holding up a business. I'd been holding up people, families, lives. And they were holding me now. Later that evening after the lunch rush, I sat alone in the back booth, nursing a lukewarm coffee and watching the regulars file in. A single mom with her 2 kids. An old couple who ordered the same meal every week. A sanitation worker still in uniform. All people Rick wouldn't think twice about stepping over. I got up, walked to the kitchen, and grabbed a clean menu. Then I rewrote the dedication on the front page. "In memory of Margaret Miller, and in gratitude to every honest person who shows up, tells the truth, and makes room at the table." I didn't need Rick's name in anything anymore. That night, Maria called. "There's a woman at the restaurant asking for you." "Which one?" "Crown Heights." "You get her name?" She hesitated. She said it was Rosa. Said she was family. My heart paused. Rosa. Margaret's cousin. The one we'd lost touch with years ago after a falling out about an inheritance dispute I barely remembered. I got there 20 minutes later. She was sitting at table 4, wearing a brown coat with buttons missing. Hair silver now, wrists thinner than I remembered. When she saw me, she stood. Tears already falling. "I read what your son did," she said. "I couldn't stay away." I didn't say anything at first, just pulled her into a hug. We stood there for a while. Like we were holding the broken pieces of Margaret between us. "Stay for dinner," I said finally. "I didn't come to eat." "You're family. You don't need a reason." Maria brought us pot roast, Margaret's recipe. I hadn't tasted it in years. Rosa laughed when she saw it. She would have loved this. We talked about old times, about Maria, about the ledger, about how long it takes to finally admit someone you love turned into someone you don't recognize. "You know what I learned?" Rosa said near the end of the meal. "You can forgive someone in your heart and still keep the door locked." I nodded. She looked around the restaurant, eyes soft. "It's beautiful what you kept. What you didn't let him take." "He tried." She smiled. "But he failed." After she left, I sat in the kitchen and pulled Margaret's ledger from my coat pocket. I added a new line, right beneath her last entry. "Teach them dignity. If not for them, then for yourself." The trial was scheduled for early November. Evelyn told me it would likely take 3 days, 4 if the defense tried to drag their feet. I asked her if I needed to testify. "Yes," she said. "They're going to try to cast doubt on everything. The documents, the whiskey, even your memory. We need your voice in the room." I nodded, even though my stomach sank. I wasn't afraid of the courtroom. I was afraid of who I might see in my son's eyes when I looked across that room. The child who used to ride his bike up and down our block until the streetlights came on? Or the man who tried to rob me of everything in one orchestrated dinner? The Friday before trial, I walked to the waterfront, where Margaret and I used to take Sunday strolls. She liked to pick out her future house from the line of brownstones near Atlantic Ave. We never bought one, but she never stopped dreaming. I sat on the same bench she used to rest on, her hand always tucking beneath my elbow like she belonged there. The river was gray, windy, noisy with gulls. It matched the noise in my head. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Rosa. A photo. It was the front porch of her place. 2 kids, her grandsons, sitting beside a carved pumpkin, smiling. The caption read, "You're welcome to join us for Thanksgiving. You still matter to people." I didn't realize I was crying until my hands went cold. Back home, I opened the drawer where I'd stashed Rick's last photo, the framed one from years ago. Before the marriage, before the manipulation. His graduation day, Margaret's arm around him, my hand on his shoulder. I turned the frame down, not smashed, just no longer on display. Let the past live in the drawer now. That night, I called Maria. "Do you want to be there?" I asked. "At the trial?" "Yes." She was quiet for a long moment. "Only if you think it helps." "It will. I'll be there." 3 days later, we walked into the courthouse together. I wore the navy suit. She wore a plain gray dress and no makeup, but she held her head higher than I'd ever seen. When Rick entered the courtroom, I didn't look away. He did. The prosecutor opened with facts. Evelyn followed with the documents, the toxicology, the security footage. They played it all. The courtroom wasn't big, but it felt full. Press, legal aides, a few silent observers. Then it was my turn. I stepped into the witness box, raised my hand, swore an oath, and told them everything. Not with anger, not with bitterness. Just the truth. The dinner, the whiskey, the text, the walk into the night. When I finished, the room was silent. Even Rick didn't meet my eyes, and that silence, for the first time in a long while, felt like peace. By the end of the second day, the courtroom air felt heavier than it should have. Not loud, not chaotic, just tense. The kind of tension that builds when no one wants to say the thing that needs to be said. Emma didn't show. Her lawyer entered a plea agreement mid-morning. Testimony in exchange for a reduced sentence. Evelyn leaned over during a recess and whispered, "This helps us. Let her talk." And she did. Emma took the stand just after lunch. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. She didn't even look at me. Her tone was cold, distant, but everything she said matched the paper trail. Yes, Rick ordered the drug online. I researched how to dose it based on body weight. Yes, we switched the whiskey bottle. He bought the original. I resealed the replacement. Yes, we planned to get the signature that night and submit the documents the next morning. And yes, we knew he would never sign if he wasn't under the influence. The prosecutor asked, "Why target Mr. Miller?" She paused, then said, "Because he had what we didn't. Security, legacy, and Rick felt like it was owed to him." Owed. That word landed like a brick. After her testimony, she was escorted out. No one clapped, no gasps, just silence again. And Rick, he finally looked up. Straight at me. It wasn't anger on his face, it was shame, but not enough to speak. The judge recessed for the day. Closing statements scheduled for the morning. Outside the courthouse, the wind had turned colder. November had arrived, and with it, a quiet clarity. Maria walked beside me down the courthouse steps. She didn't say much, just handed me a folded napkin from her coat pocket. Inside was a lemon muffin she'd made that morning. "For the ride home," she said. "You looked tired up there?" "Felt tired too," I said. "But not weak," she replied. And she meant it. At home that night, I sat in Margaret's old chair, muffin untouched, and let the silence settle in. This wasn't victory, not yet. but it was the beginning of something I hadn't felt in years. Closure. I scrolled through my contacts and stopped at Rosa's name. Typed a simple message. Yes, Thanksgiving, I'll bring the stuffing. She replied almost instantly. Make sure it's the sage kind. You know the kids hate anything else. And just like that, something long dormant in me shifted. Like the calendar in my heart had finally moved forward a page. Verdict day. I didn't dress up. No suit. No polished shoes. Just slacks, a sweater Margaret once called my favorite grandpa uniform, and a quiet heart. Evelyn met me outside the courthouse. She looked sharper than usual, but her eyes were softer. We've done everything right, she said. Doesn't mean it'll feel good? No, she agreed, but it'll feel finished. Inside, the courtroom was only half full. Press in the back, a few scattered faces. Rosa had come, sat 2 rows behind me with a bag of tissues she never used. Rick stood beside his lawyer, hands folded in front of him. He looked like a man who'd stopped pretending. And that, I'll admit, broke something small and old in me. The judge asked him to stand. On the first charge, attempted fraud, guilty. Second, conspiracy to commit elder abuse, guilty. Third, use of controlled substance in commission of a crime, guilty. Each word landed like a gavel to the ribs. Rick didn't react. Not a flinch, not a shake. Just nodded once, as if finally agreeing with the truth. The judge set sentencing for December 8th. After court, Evelyn and I walked through City Hall Park. She said nothing at first, then handed me a small envelope. What's this? I asked. Maria's new paperwork, full employment contract, healthcare, benefits, everything. I opened it. There was a note inside. In her handwriting. Thank you for seeing me. For trusting me. For hiring a stranger when your family betrayed you. This is the first time in my life I've been treated like I matter. I folded it carefully. Slipped it into my jacket. That afternoon, I stopped by the Crown Heights location. Maria was there, clipboard in hand, running inventory. When she saw me, she waved me back toward the kitchen. You here to check the books? She asked. No, just wanted to see how it's running. Better, she said. Everyone shows up on time now. No one's stealing napkins. We both laughed. For the first time in a long while, I felt joy that wasn't tied to nostalgia or memory. Just presence. Before I left, she stopped me. You okay? She asked. I thought about it. I think I'm becoming okay. She nodded. That's harder, but it lasts longer. That night, I lit a candle beside Margaret's photo. Something I hadn't done in years. Just sat with it. The woman who taught me patience. The son who taught me boundaries. The stranger who taught me courage. I didn't need more than that. The restaurant felt different after the verdict. Not in the way people spoke, but in the way they stopped speaking when I walked in. Not out of pity, out of respect. Like they understood something had shifted in me, and I wasn't handing pieces of myself out anymore to be stepped on. Even Miguel, never short on words, just nodded and offered a seat near the window. You want the good coffee or the usual? He asked. Surprise me. He brought both. Later that week, I took a short walk to the bank where Rick once begged me to co-sign a loan he didn't qualify for. I remembered the way the loan officer had looked at him, polite, doubtful, and then at me, with some mix of pity and reassurance. He knows you're the one holding this up, Margaret had said later that night. I closed the last joint account that day, left with a cashier's check in my name only. The final tether cut. Then I visited Margaret's grave. I brought 2 things, the verdict in my coat pocket and a slice of lemon cake from the Crown Heights kitchen. They finally saw what I couldn't, I said, sitting beside her. But you always did, didn't you? The breeze rustled the grass. A car passed slowly on the nearby path. In the quiet, I imagined her hand in mine. Not warm, not soft, just steady. just enough to keep me from falling. I didn't say much more. Some grief doesn't want words, it just wants you to show up. That weekend, I spent Sunday dinner at Rosa's. The kids had made hand-drawn place cards. Mine read, Uncle John. We sat around a wobbly table with mismatched chairs and paper napkins. No linen, no chandeliers, no illusions. Just warmth. Someone passed me a bowl of green beans. Someone else filled my cup with apple cider. Rosa smiled across the table and mouthed, "This is what stays." And she was right. After dinner, the kids pulled out a shoebox of old photographs they'd found in her attic. One of them was from Margaret's 40th birthday. We were at a park. Rick was maybe 9. He had icing on his chin and a look in his eyes I hadn't seen in decades. Mischief without malice. I looked at that face and felt not rage, not grief, just distance. Like watching someone else's life through a glass window in winter. Later that night, back home, I cleaned out the last drawer in the hall closet, found old receipts, brittle birthday cards, and a letter Rick had written me for Father's Day when he was 13. Thanks for helping me with my science project, and for not yelling when I melted your measuring cup. I folded it up, placed it beside Margaret's letter in the cedar box. Not because I forgave what he'd done, but because the boy he was still mattered, even if the man he became never came back. December 8th arrived cold and brittle. I didn't want to go, I didn't need to see the sentence handed down, but Evelyn insisted it mattered. It's not about punishment, she said. It's about the record, about drawing a line between what they tried to take and what you kept. So I went. Maria came too. The courtroom was quieter this time. No press, no observers, just a few stray clerks and the echo of heating vents overhead. Rick stood in the same spot, same beige jumpsuit, shoulders slumped like the floor was trying to claim him. Emma didn't show. When the judge entered, no one rose. Just a quiet shuffle of papers and the clack of the gavel. Richard Miller, the judge began, you have been found guilty on 3 counts. You targeted a member of your family with premeditated fraud. You attempted to manipulate, drug, and dispossess your own father of the business he built. Rick stared straight ahead. No emotion. For these crimes, the judge continued, you are sentenced to 8 years in state custody with eligibility for parole after 5. Mandatory rehabilitation and financial restitution are included as conditions. The words landed flat. No drama, no shock, just the law, doing its slow, precise work. Rick looked at me once. Just once. I held his gaze. He opened his mouth to speak, but the bailiff tapped his arm, and he was gone. Back into the holding hallway, back into silence. Outside, Maria and I stood on the courthouse steps. She zipped her coat higher against the wind. You okay? She asked. No, I said. But I'm better. She nodded. That's the best kind of okay. We didn't talk much on the train ride back. Brooklyn's skyline opened up just before the tunnel, and I thought of Margaret again. Not with pain, not with longing, just with company. That evening, I pulled down the holiday box from the closet, the one I hadn't touched since she passed. Inside were ornaments wrapped in yellowing tissue. One of them was shaped like a chili pepper. Rick had made it in 4th grade, said it reminded him of my cooking. Margaret had laughed and hung it right in front, every single year. I held it for a while, then gently set it on the mantel. Not because I wanted to remember him, but because I needed to remember me. The version of myself who taught a boy to cook, who danced in the kitchen with his wife, who once believed in good endings. That version was still in there, just buried under too many years of swallowing things whole. No more of that. The first snow fell 2 days before Christmas. Just a light dusting, like someone shook powdered sugar across the city. Maria texted me a photo of the Crown Heights storefront. wreath on the door, snow clinging to the windows. She'd added a chalkboard sign outside. Yes, we're open. Yes, the pot roast is warm. I couldn't help but smile. For the first time in years, the holidays didn't feel like something I had to survive. They felt like something I could choose. I spent Christmas Eve with Rosa's family. No drama, no speeches. The kids forced me into a board game I didn't understand and cheated kindly until I won. Rosa made hot chocolate with real cinnamon sticks, like Margaret used to. Before I left, she handed me a box wrapped in old newspaper. It's not much, she said. Inside was a framed photo. Me, Margaret, and Rick. Years ago, before everything, at the opening of our third restaurant. I'd forgotten it even existed. Rosa touched my arm. I thought you'd want the memory. Not because of him, because of her. She was right. Christmas morning, I woke up to quiet. No guilt, no expectation. Just the hum of the heater and a patch of sun across the living room floor. I made myself eggs, toasted one of the last muffins Maria had left me, sat by the window and watched the neighborhood begin its slow, festive stir. Kids bundled up, a couple walking a dog, someone scraping their windshield with a credit card. I didn't miss the mansion, or the fake politeness, or the performative gives. I missed Margaret, of course. But even that hurt less now, like a scar instead of a wound. That afternoon, I visited the Park Slope location, just to check in. Miguel was working, along with two of the younger hosts. When I walked in, they handed me a gift bag. Inside, a chef's apron with stitched red letters. Founding father, I laughed. Figured you'd finally earned the title, Miguel said. They made me sit for a meal. Didn't let me pay. Nora brought me pie from the back. You don't leave here hungry, she said. And I didn't. Later that night, I walked home slowly through the slush. Took the long way, past the tree lot where Margaret used to drag me every year to just look, and somehow always leave with a 10-foot spruce. The lot was closed now, but a single strand of light still blinked around the fence. I stopped for a moment, let the cold sting my cheeks. Then I said aloud, to no one and everyone, I made it, Mar. New Year's Eve crept up quietly. No invitations, no pressure. Just the slow close of a year that had taken everything apart and handed me back only what mattered. I spent the morning at the restaurant, not to work, just to watch. Maria had organized a staff brunch for the kitchen crew, potluck style. Everyone brought something from home. A guy named Kevin, one of the newer dishwashers, showed up with fried plantains that vanished in minutes. Even the shy prep cook, Lena, brought her mother's rice pudding, the kind with too much cinnamon, just the way Margaret used to like it. I kept to the side mostly, just observed, listened. I wasn't needed to lead anymore. That's the best thing you can give people when they've earned your trust, space. That afternoon, I sat on the back steps with Maria. We shared the last slice of something unidentifiable and far too sweet. It was crumbling, coconut-covered, probably homemade by someone's grandmother. You going anywhere tonight? She asked. Just home. No champagne toast? No noise. She nodded like that was the most reasonable thing in the world. I'm lighting a candle for my father, she said, and calling my sister in Puebla. She just got her visa approved. First time we'll talk without fear in years. That's worth a toast. I'll make tea, she said, smiling. That's safer. Later, back at home, I turned on the radio. Not the TV, just one of those stations that plays old jazz and countdown music until midnight. A saxophone drifting through the kitchen felt better than 1,000 shouting voices on some rooftop screen. I cooked myself a proper dinner. Roast chicken, Brussels sprouts, mashed potatoes from scratch. Poured a glass of red wine. Sat at the table with a cloth napkin and Margaret's candle burning in the middle. I'd eaten alone before, but this didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like space. A table set with no lies, no manipulation, no one pretending, No tight smiles or phony warmth or forced questions about the business. Just a meal and a man and a memory. At 11 I walked to the drawer where I'd hidden all the old documents. The near-forged power of attorney, the bank transfers, the fake signatures, the photo from court. I took the whole pile and placed it in a manila envelope. Didn't reread them, didn't hesitate. Then I walked out to the street and fed it all to the blue recycling bin by the curb. All of it, gone. No fanfare, no speech. Just one final, quiet refusal to carry what wasn't mine anymore. At 11:57, Rosa called. She and the boys were watching the countdown on TV, hats askew, popcorn on the floor. "You sure you don't want to come over?" she asked. "Next year." "You said that last year." "Yeah," I said. "But I didn't mean it then." She laughed. I could hear the kids in the background yelling over one another, making predictions about which neighbor would fall asleep first. I imagined her couch, the chaos of it, the safety. I didn't need to be there to know it was love. At midnight, I stood by the window and watched the fireworks bloom in little red pulses over the buildings. Someone down the block shouted, "Happy New Year!" A car horn honked back. Kids screamed somewhere, joyful and untamed. The street lamps flickered across wet pavement. Brooklyn still humming, still living. I raised my glass. "To what we kept," I said softly, "and to who we became." Then I blew out Margaret's candle. It wasn't a goodbye, it was a thank you. The following week, Evelyn called with one last update. "The restitution plan was approved," she said. "Rick has agreed to forfeit the condo, the car, and what's left of his accounts. Most of it will go toward legal fees and the mandatory repayment order." "I don't want it," I said. "I know," she replied, "but you deserve to know what was recovered." "What about Emma?" "She moved out of state. No charges filed where she is. She's off the radar now." "Let her stay there." "You sure you're done?" I looked around my kitchen, new paint on the walls, fresh linoleum underfoot, Margaret's apron hanging beside the stove. "Yeah," I said, "I'm done." That night I stopped by the Crown Heights location unannounced. The dinner rush had just started. Maria was behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, ordering flour with one hand and answering a staff question with the other. She saw me and smiled. "You here for table?" "No," I said. "Just came to say thank you." "For what?" "For showing up when everyone else was walking out." She tilted her head. "That's what decent people do, Mr. Miller." "You can call me John." She smiled. "Then you better start calling me Maria, not ma'am, like I'm your supervisor." "I think you're everyone's supervisor now." We laughed. And then, because I meant it, I said, "Happy New Year, Maria." She wiped her hands, leaned across the counter, and said, "New year, new peace." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Spring came quietly that year. No announcements, no surprises. Just softer light on the sidewalks and jackets left open instead of zipped. I started walking again. Mornings, mostly, along the same route Margaret and I used to take on Saturdays. Past the bakery, past the small bookstore that still hadn't changed its window display, past the mural on Bergen that kept getting painted over and reborn. I found that I liked the rhythm. My breath keeping pace with my thoughts. The city waking up around me. Sunlight angling across bricks and fire escapes, catching steam rising from subway grates. It wasn't healing exactly, but it was motion, and sometimes that's enough. The restaurants ran smoother than ever. Maria had taken full charge of the Crown Heights location and made it hers. She added a morning menu, convinced me to trial delivery apps, rewrote the training manual from scratch. Plain language, fair hours, clear rules, zero tolerance for mistreatment. Her staff adored her, not in the performative way people treat a boss they fear, but with real loyalty. Quiet, earned loyalty. "I just don't want anyone here to feel invisible," she told me one afternoon. Drying her hands on a clean towel, I watched her move through the kitchen, checking timers, correcting invoices, hugging a line cook whose mother had just passed. Margaret would have loved her, not just because she worked hard, but because she didn't need praise to do the right thing. In early March, I received one final letter from the state. Rick had begun his sentence. He'd declined appeal. The restitution agreement had been finalized and filed. No hearings remained, no lawyers, no phone calls, no unfinished pieces. I held the letter for a while, read it once, then again, slower, and then I shredded it. I didn't need a document to tell me what was over. A week later, Rosa invited me to dinner again. Her boys had made a banner out of construction paper. Uneven lettering, glued stars, their version of a parade. It read, "Welcome, Uncle John. We ate spaghetti with too much garlic." The table was loud and clumsy. Someone spilled juice. Someone else told a joke that didn't land. I told the story of how Margaret and I once burned a whole roast because we danced too long in the living room and forgot the timer. The kids roared with laughter. After dinner, Rosa poured us tea. We sat in the kitchen, just the two of us. "You found your peace," she said. I looked down at the mug in my hands. "I'm still learning it," she nodded. "That's how you know it's real." That night, walking home, I passed a small gallery with an open door. Local artists, tiny space. I wandered in. There was a canvas on the far wall, acrylic, abstract. Burnt orange and deep blue swirled together like sky pressing down into earth. The tag beneath read, "Inheritance 2023. I stared at it longer than I meant to. Not because it reminded me of Margaret. Not because it looked like Rick. Not even because it resembled anything we lost. Because it didn't. It looked like something I still had. Something I could still give. Not property, not a business. Not even money. Something quieter. Something deeper. Integrity. Steadiness. A name without stain. Back home, I opened the cedar box again. Margaret's letter still sat inside, corners curled slightly from age. I'd read it so many times the ink had started to fade. This time, I slipped something new beside it. The photo Rosa had given me. The one from before everything went wrong. Not to forget. Not to forgive, just to remember who I was before it all, and who I chose to remain after. 2 weeks later, I rehired Robert, an old cook who'd left during the pandemic. Fallen on hard times. He showed up with his hat in his hands. Didn't ask for charity, just asked for a chance. "You didn't have to," he said after his first shift. "I wanted to." "You're not like most bosses." "I'm not interested in being most anything." He grinned at that. Last Tuesday, I finally put up new curtains in the living room. Margaret had talked about it every spring for years, never quite finding the time. I chose yellow ones, bright, ridiculous. She would have hated them, but she would have smiled at the effort. And yesterday, I hosted dinner, my table, my roast. Maria came. So did Rosa and the boys. Miguel dropped by with a bottle of wine and a ridiculous game he insisted we all learn. I don't remember laughing that much in years. No one talked about Rick. No one talked about courtrooms. No one talked about what we'd lost. Just food, laughter, plans. Afterward, they helped me wash the dishes without being asked. When they left, I stood at the front door and watched the taillights disappear around the corner. Then I closed the door. Not with fear, not with sadness. Just peace. A quiet, earned peace. I poured one last glass of wine, sat in Margaret's chair, and looked around. Not rich, not grand, but mine, and honest. That's what I'm leaving behind. That's the real inheritance. If you stayed with me through this story, thank you. And if you've ever had to rebuild yourself from betrayal, from grief, from silence, you're not alone. Take care of what's yours, and go easy on the next version of yourself. They've got a good heart.